In 1991, in a small farming town in the middle of the Canadian prairie, a woman married a doctor. He was everything a small town wants a doctor to be. He delivered their babies. He set their broken arms. He raised money to build the children a public swimming pool. When people in Kipling, Saskatchewan said the words, "Dr. John," they smiled. His wife had 2 young children from her first marriage. He raised them as his own. They had 2 more daughters together, 4 kids, a house, a practice, a town that adored him. 8 years later, Lisa would stand in a courtroom and watch a jury convict her husband of crimes so calculated they made forensic history. And the question that would follow her for the rest of her life wasn't, how did he do it? It was, this is the story of the perfect small-town doctor, the woman nobody believed, and the wife who finally did. John Schneeberger was not from Saskatchewan. He wasn't even from Canada. He was born in 1961 in what was then Northern Rhodesia, today Zambia. He was educated in South Africa at a prestigious boarding school and then at Stellenbosch University, where he earned his medical degree. His older brother Bill became a cardiothoracic surgeon. In 1987, John emigrated to Canada, and like a lot of foreign-trained doctors, he ended up where Canada needed doctors most: the rural prairie, small towns, places where one physician leaving could mean an entire community losing its health care. His first stop was a clinic in Oxbow, Saskatchewan. That's where he met the receptionist. Her name was Lisa. She was a young mother of 2, a daughter and a son from a previous relationship, working the front desk of a small-town medical clinic. And the new doctor noticed her. He was charming in the way that made people feel chosen, educated, soft-spoken, an accent that stood out in rural Saskatchewan, and he was good with her kids, which, for a single mother, is not a small thing. It might be the biggest thing. In 1991, Lisa married him. She would later say it plainly, in her own words, "I loved that man. He was my soulmate, my best friend. We were going to grow old together." And honestly, based on everything she could see, she had married the perfect man. The family settled in Kipling, Saskatchewan. Population, around 1,100 people. To understand what happens in this story, you have to understand what a doctor is in a town like that. Kipling had 2 physicians. 2 for the entire town and the farms around it. Your doctor isn't a stranger you see once a year. He delivers your children. He treats your parents. He knows your medical history and your family history. Because in a town of 1,100, those are the same thing. Dr. John leaned into that role, and the town loved him for it. Lisa would later remember that not a day went by without someone stopping her in the street to say, "Oh, you're so lucky to be married to such a wonderful man." He worked at the Kipling Medical Center and took call shifts at Kipling Memorial Hospital. When the town wanted a public swimming pool for its kids, he helped raise the money. He showed up. He shook hands. He remembered names. Lisa and John had 2 daughters together. 4 children now under one roof. Her 2 and their 2. From the outside, it was the kind of life people moved to small towns hoping to find. A respected husband, healthy kids, a community that waved at you in the grocery store. Lisa believed in that life, completely. Her name was Candice Fonagy. Everyone called her Candy. She was 23 years old, a single mother with a high school diploma and a job at the local gas station. Her parents, Virginia and Ed, farmed outside of town, and a few months earlier, Candy had given birth, and the doctor who delivered her baby was John Schneeberger. He was her family doctor. In Kipling, he was almost everyone's family doctor. On the night of October 31st, 1992, Candy had a fight with her boyfriend. Upset, she drove to Kipling Memorial Hospital, not for treatment. She was looking for a friend who worked there, someone to talk to. Her friend wasn't on shift. The nurses, trying to help, suggested she see the on-call doctor, someone who could give her something to calm her nerves. The on-call doctor that night was John Schneeberger. Schneeberger suggested a sedative. Candy expected a pill. He came back with a syringe. The drug was versed, midazolam, a surgical anesthetic. In the dose he gave her, it does two things. It paralyzes the body, and it erases memory. It is, in the most literal sense, a drug designed to make sure a patient cannot move and will not remember. But Candy remembered. She later described it like being at the dentist, when your gums are frozen and you can't feel the pain, but you can still feel the pressure. She could not move, she could not cry out, and she knew exactly what was happening to her. When she came to, she was alone on the exam table. Here is where this story becomes something different, because what Candy did in the minutes and days after that assault is the reason this case was ever solved. Candy took off her underwear and sealed it in a plastic bag. Evidence. Before anyone had believed or disbelieved her, before any investigation existed, a 23-year-old gas station attendant secured her own crime scene. Then she called him. She asked Schneeberger directly what drug he had given her, and his answer, to a patient asking a medical question, was this. He asked if she'd had some crazy dreams. Candy drove to a rape crisis clinic. A rape kit was done. Blood was drawn. The results? Semen was recovered, and the anesthetic versed was confirmed in her bloodstream. A surgical drug she had no prescription for and no reason to have been given. She went to the RCMP and reported that Dr. John Schneeberger had drugged and raped her. This should have been the end of the story. A semen sample, a named suspect, one DNA test. In November 1992, the RCMP took a blood sample from Schneeberger's arm. He provided it voluntarily. Cooperative, calm, confident. The lab compared his blood to the semen from the rape kit. No match. Not inconclusive. Not partial. No match. According to the most reliable forensic science available, John Schneeberger was not the man who assaulted Candice Fonagy. In a town of 1,100 people, that result meant everything. The beloved doctor, the man who delivered your children, who raised money for the swimming pool, had been accused of something monstrous, and science itself had just cleared him. Kipling turned on Candy. She was a liar, she was unstable. Some people said she'd had a crush on the doctor and made it all up when he turned her down. She was, in the town's whispered shorthand, a party girl who told a story. And Schneeberger fed the doubt with a doctor's authority. He suggested Versed was known to cause hallucinations, including, he said, hallucinations of sexual activity. In other words, she wasn't lying, exactly. She just dreamed it. The drug he chose to erase her memory became his explanation for her memory. And in the Schneeberger house, Lisa heard the accusation, heard the whispers, and then heard the DNA result. Her husband had volunteered his own blood, and his own blood had cleared him. What wife wouldn't believe that? What wife believes a stranger over science? And the science was about to clear him again. Candy didn't stop. At her insistence, a second DNA test was done in August 1993, this time under police supervision. Blood drawn from Schneeberger's arm, watched by officers. No match. Again, 2 tests, 2 samples, 2 failures. In 1994, the RCMP closed the investigation. Candice Fonagy had lost. Not in court. She never got a court. She lost in the only venues available to her, the lab and the town. She packed up and moved hours away to Red Deer, Alberta, to start over somewhere her name didn't come with a story attached. The doctor stayed. The town exhaled. Life in Kipling went back to normal. That same year, with the case closed, the accuser gone, and the town's trust fully restored, John Schneeberger began entering his stepdaughter's bedroom at night. Lisa's daughter. She was 13 years old. He injected her with a drug, the way he had injected Candy. By any reasonable measure, it was over. 2 DNA tests, 2 clean results, a closed investigation, an accuser who'd left the province. If Candice Fonagy had walked away in 1994, nobody would have blamed her. Everyone else already had. She didn't walk away. From Red Deer, hours from Kipling, working and raising her child, Candy did something almost nobody in her position does. She kept the case alive, privately, on her own money. She hired a private investigator, Larry O'Brien, a 25-year veteran of the RCMP. His job was simple to say and nearly impossible to do: get a DNA sample from John Schneeberger that Schneeberger didn't control. It means Candy had already figured out the thing the police hadn't. Both official tests had one thing in common: Schneeberger's body, Schneeberger's arm, Schneeberger's cooperation. Candy's theory was as simple as it was insane-sounding. Somehow, some way, the doctor was beating the test itself, and the only way to prove it was to get his DNA without asking. O'Brien's first plan was clever. An associate walked into Schneeberger's office with a story about a radio contest. Get the doctor to lick an envelope, walk out with his saliva. It worked, and then it didn't. The envelope was contaminated, useless, so O'Brien stopped being clever. Larry O'Brien broke into John Schneeberger's car and stole his used chapstick, a tube of lip balm, skin cells on wax. A private lab ran the DNA from that chapstick against the semen from Candy's rape kit, a kit that only existed because a drugged 23-year-old had thought to preserve her own crime scene 4 years earlier, alone on an exam table, while a surgical anesthetic was still in her blood. Match. The chapstick DNA matched the rapist's DNA, which meant two things, and both of them were explosive. 1. John Schneeberger assaulted Candice Fonagy. 2. The blood coming out of John Schneeberger's arm, twice, once under police supervision, was somehow not John Schneeberger's blood. She had him, except she didn't. A DNA sample obtained by breaking into a man's car is not evidence a criminal court is going to build a case on. What it gave her wasn't a conviction. It gave her a door, and she went through it. Candy sued him. Civil court, where she could compel things a closed criminal case couldn't. And in civil proceedings around 1996, she got what she'd been chasing for 4 years: a court-ordered blood draw, police witnesses in the room, no cooperation required. The technician came to take the sample and asked to draw blood from Schneeberger's finger. Schneeberger refused. He insisted the blood come from his arm, the same spot as the 2 tests before. The technician tied him off, found the vein, and pushed the needle in. Nothing came out. The vein was right there, engorged, visible, exactly where a vein should be, and it would not give blood. The technician struggled, repositioned, tried again. What they finally managed to pull from John Schneeberger's arm was a sample so small and so degraded, the lab called it inconclusive. 3 tests now, 2 clean results and 1 failure, every one of them from the same few square centimeters of the same arm, at his insistence. A doctor who won't give blood from his finger, a vein that's full and empty, a man who beat the most reliable forensic science on earth twice, and the only thing he ever demanded in return was the needle going into one exact spot. And yet, nothing happened. That's the part of this story that should make you angriest. The private DNA said guilty. The court-ordered test said nothing. The criminal case stayed closed. The town's mind stayed made up. Candy was now years and tens of thousands of dollars into proving something she had known since the night it happened. And officially, on paper, John Schneeberger was still an innocent man. He was still practicing medicine, still delivering babies, still Dr. John, still living in that house, with Lisa and the 4 kids, in a marriage Lisa still believed in. People still stopped her in the street to tell her how lucky she was, because from where Lisa stood, what had actually changed? A woman who'd already been cleared twice had paid a lab to say otherwise. That's what it looked like from inside the fairy tale. It was April 1997 when the fairy tale ended, and it wasn't Candy who ended it. It was a Friday in April. Lisa's daughter, her firstborn from her first marriage, came to her and said 5 words. "Mom, I have something to tell you." She took her mother by the hand, walked her to her own bedroom, and showed her what was in her bed. A condom wrapper. She was 15 years old, and what she told her mother, standing in that room, was what you have known since 1994, that her stepfather had been coming into her room at night, that he injected her with something, that it had been happening for years, while Candice Fonagy was being called a liar, while Lisa was defending him, while the town waved at Dr. John in the grocery store. What happens in the next few minutes of Lisa's life is the reason she is the second protagonist of this story and not a footnote in it. Lisa had spent 5 years on her husband's side of this. She had heard Candy's accusation and believed the DNA instead, twice. She had science, the police, and the whole town agreeing with her. Her entire life, her marriage, her home, her children's father, her own judgment, was built on John being innocent. Her daughter's 5 words asked her to tear all of it down. She didn't hesitate. Lisa believed her daughter, immediately, completely, and went straight to the police. No, are you sure? No thinking it over. No quiet family solution. No protecting the house and the name and the fairy tale. A 15-year-old told her mother the truth, and her mother picked her up and carried it directly to the RCMP. It is the single fastest right decision anyone makes in this entire story, and Lisa would spend years telling anyone who asked that it came 5 years too late, that her deepest regret was every day she had believed her husband over Candice Fonagy. A second victim changed everything. This wasn't a closed case with a cleared suspect anymore. This was a pattern, the same method, a syringe in the night, reported from inside the man's own house. The RCMP came back to John Schneeberger for a 4th DNA test, and this time, someone had finally learned the lesson of the first 3. Test 1, blood from his arm. Test 2, blood from his arm. Test 3, blood from his arm. At his insistence, from a full vein that mysteriously wouldn't bleed. The 4th test took 3 samples: blood from his finger, a swab from his mouth, a hair pulled from the follicle. Notice the one place on John Schneeberger's body nobody touched this time. All 3 samples were sent to the lab and compared against the semen from Candy's 1992 rape kit and against the evidence collected in his stepdaughter's case. All 3 matched. Both cases, 5 years, 2 victims, 4 tests. And the very first moment, that anyone took DNA from any part of John Schneeberger other than that one patch of that one arm, he matched everything. The man the science had cleared twice was arrested and charged, and the question Candice Fonagy had been asking into the void since 1996 was now the question of an entire criminal trial. What is in his arm? The trial of John Schneeberger opened in Regina, Saskatchewan in the fall of 1999, 7 years after Halloween night, 2 years after his stepdaughter opened her bedroom door. The charges: the sexual assault of Candice Fonagy, 2 counts of sexual assault against his stepdaughter, administering a noxious substance, and obstruction of justice. That last charge is the one this act is about, because the trial had to answer the question everyone, the jury, the town, Candy, and you, had been carrying: how does a guilty man's blood come back clean? Twice? A Penrose drain is a piece of ordinary surgical equipment. A soft, flexible rubber tube, the kind surgeons place in a wound to let fluid escape while it heals. Every hospital has them. A doctor can pick one up without anyone asking a single question. John Schneeberger took a Penrose drain about 15 centimeters long, roughly 6 inches. He filled it with another man's blood. Then he added anticoagulants, the chemicals that stop blood from clotting, so the blood inside the tube would stay liquid, stay usable, stay ready. And then, using his own surgical training, he implanted the tube in his own arm, under his own skin, positioned exactly where a technician would go looking for a vein. Go back to November 1992. The RCMP asks the cooperative doctor for a blood sample. He offers his arm, of course he does. The needle goes in. It pierces the rubber tube sitting where a vein should be, and what flows out into the vial is a stranger's. The lab, doing everything right, compares an innocent man's blood to the rapist's semen. No match. August 1993. Under police supervision, the needle goes into the same spot, the same tube, the same borrowed blood. No match. The science was never wrong. It was answering the question with perfect accuracy. The blood in that vial did not belong to the man who assaulted Candice Fonagy. The blood in that vial barely belonged to the man it was taken from. And the third test, around 1996, the court ordered draw, the engorged vein that wouldn't bleed. By then, the blood inside the tube had been sitting in his arm so long it had partially dried out. That's why the technician couldn't pull a sample. That's why the vein looked full and gave nothing. The tube was running empty. Candy's instinct, all those years ago, had been exactly right. He wasn't beating the science. He was feeding it someone else's answer. Schneeberger's defense at trial had to explain one small problem: the fourth test. The finger, the mouth, the hair. His actual DNA, matching the semen in Candy's rape kit. Here is the explanation his defense offered. To a jury, out loud. Candice Fonagy broke into his house, stole a used condom, and planted his semen on her own body as part of a plot to frame him. That was the theory. The 23-year-old gas station attendant who sealed her own underwear in a plastic bag minutes after being drugged. She was actually a criminal mastermind who burgled a doctor's home for his condoms, then spent 7 years and her family's savings maintaining the frame job, including hiring a retired RCMP officer to steal the chapstick of a man she already had DNA from. The jury was also asked to believe this explained his stepdaughter's case. It was not explained how. The jury rejected all of it. On Thursday, November 25, 1999, John Schneeberger was convicted of the sexual assault of Candice Fonagy, of 2 counts of sexual assault against his stepdaughter, of administering a noxious substance, the Versed, and of obstruction of justice for the tube of another man's blood he had carried inside his own arm for years. When the verdict was read, the courtroom did something courtrooms are not supposed to do. People whispered yes, then they applauded. And as Dr. John was led out in handcuffs, somebody shouted after him, "Bye, John." Outside the courthouse, reporters found Candice Fonagy, 7 years, 4 tests, 1 chapstick, and an entire town's contempt after Halloween night, 1992. She said, "This is a glorious day that I've waited for 7 years." The sentence came down for drugging and raping a patient, for sexually assaulting a child in his care, in her own bed, for years, for a surgical implant built for the sole purpose of defeating justice, a scheme so elaborate it very nearly worked, for 5 years. 6 years. Remember that number, because this story does not end with the applause in that courtroom. What Canada did with John Schneeberger next, and what its courts did to Lisa and her daughters, is the part almost nobody tells. John Schneeberger went to prison, first Bowden Institution in Alberta, later a minimum security facility in British Columbia. Lisa divorced him, took back her maiden name, Dillman, and moved with the children to Red Deer, Alberta, the same city, as it happens, where Candice Fonagy had rebuilt her life. And here is where you probably expect this story to become an epilogue. The monster is in a cell. The wife is free. The children are safe. Instead, the night before his guilty verdict, Lisa had refused to let her 2 youngest daughters sleep over at their father's house. For that, John Schneeberger took his own wife to court and won contempt, a $2,000 fine. The night before a jury convicted him, the legal system fined the woman who was trying to keep her children away from him. And from his prison cell, he kept going. He demanded his visitation rights. Lisa fought it, and a justice of Saskatchewan's Court of Queen's Bench ordered her to bring the girls, 5 and 6 years old, to visit him at Bowden Penitentiary, once a month, a ruling almost without precedent. Convicted felons do not normally get access to their children without the guardian's consent. Lisa, the woman friends describe as almost impossible to rattle, wept in court. Then she decided to obey the law her ex-husband was using against her. So the visit happened. Lisa, under court order, brought 2 little girls to a prison to see their father. They froze at the entrance. They refused to walk toward him. They clung to their mother's legs, and they screamed, "Please don't make us go through those doors." The visit was stopped early. Outside the prison that day, about 100 protesters had gathered in support of Lisa and the girls, and standing among them, on the outside of those gates, exactly where she chose to be, was Lisa's oldest daughter. The 15-year-old who had ended all of this with 5 words was now 18, protesting the system that couldn't finish what she'd started. The story of the screaming girls at the prison doors made national news, and Lisa, the small-town receptionist who had spent 5 years being wrong and every day since being relentless, took it to Parliament. An Alberta Member of Parliament, Bob Mills, took up her cause. He introduced a private member's bill, Bill C-400, written to limit the visitation rights of convicted sex offenders over their own children. It had a name, Lisa's Law. The woman who once believed her husband over the evidence now had her name on legislation designed to protect children from men like him. That is the full arc, from the receptionist in Oxbow to the fairy tale wife in Kipling, to a name attached to a bill in the Parliament of Canada. And while Lisa fought, the rest of John Schneeberger's life was being taken apart, piece by piece, on paper. December 2000, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Saskatchewan revoked his medical license. Dr. John was no longer a doctor. Then Canada found something else, and it was Lisa who pointed them to it. After the divorce, she reported her ex-husband to the immigration authorities, and when they pulled his 1993 citizenship application, they found it. The application had asked, in effect, whether he had anything to disclose. He was, at that exact moment, under active police investigation for rape. With 1 failed DNA test already behind him, he didn't mention it. In August of 2003, a federal court ruled his citizenship had been obtained by fraud. That December, weeks after his release from prison, his citizenship was formally revoked. The man who had spent 16 years becoming Canadian was, once again, a South African with a permanent resident card and a criminal record that made him deportable. On November 25, 2003, John Schneeberger walked out of prison on statutory release, not parole. He had asked for parole earlier that year, told the board he was sorry, that he was a changed man. The board looked at him and ruled that he remained a high risk to reoffend. They said no. His release wasn't granted. It was automatic, required by Canadian law once 2/3 of a sentence is served. Nobody decided John Schneeberger should be free. The calendar did. November 25th, 4 years, to the day, after a courtroom in Regina applauded his conviction. Of a 6-year sentence for drugging and raping a patient and repeatedly sexually assaulting a child, he had served 4. And here is the detail from this entire story that I still can't get past. As Canada moved to deport him, his friends, people who knew exactly what he had been convicted of, began a letter-writing campaign urging the immigration minister to reverse the deportation order. Their reason? So that John Schneeberger could say goodbye to his daughters, the girls who screamed at the prison doors. The letters didn't work. On May 13, 2004, the Supreme Court of Canada refused to hear his final appeal, and on July 21, 2004, John Schneeberger was put on a plane to Johannesburg, escorted by 2 RCMP officers, and deported from Canada permanently. John Schneeberger landed in Johannesburg in July 2004 and moved to Durban, into his mother's home. South Africa knew exactly who was arriving. The press there had a name for him, not Dr. John, Dr. Rape. So, knowing that, knowing the whole country knew, what's the first significant thing he did in his new life? On August 9, 2004, 19 days after stepping off the plane, John Schneeberger applied to the Health Professions Council of South Africa for the right to practice medicine again. 19 days. A man convicted of using his medical access to drug and rape a patient, and of repeatedly assaulting a child in his home, was already asking for a prescription pad back. It didn't work. South African women's groups protested. The backlash was national, and that October he quietly withdrew the application. Not because he'd reconsidered, because he'd been caught trying. He gave exactly one interview to a South African journalist in late 2004. He refused to be photographed. The last time a current picture of him had circulated, he explained, he'd been beaten up, and in that interview, he offered his one public reckoning with everything you've just watched. Here is the full quote. "I equate my crimes to a terrible smash, where I am the cause of the devastation." A smash, a car accident, something that happens in a moment, an instant of catastrophic bad luck. A Penrose drain does not crash into your arm. It is selected, filled with another man's blood, treated with anticoagulants, and surgically implanted, and then maintained, and defended, and lied about for 5 years. Every single day of Candy's 7-year fight, and every night his stepdaughter's door opened, was a decision. That quote is the closest thing to remorse John Schneeberger has ever said out loud. He works in catering now, kitchen skills he picked up in prison. There is no record that he ever practiced medicine again. And the two women this video actually belongs to, Candice Fonagy sued Schneeberger, and sued the hospital where it happened. Her story was told on national television. In 2003, it became a film, a Canadian movie called I Accuse, where Candy was played by Estella Warren. The gas station attendant the town called a liar was portrayed by a supermodel in a film about the fact that she was right. As of the last public reporting, Candy works as a continuing care assistant at an addiction services facility in Saskatchewan. The woman nobody helped spends her working life helping people at their lowest. Lisa Dillman raised her 4 children in Red Deer under her own name. Her daughter's 5 words in April 1997 did what 4 DNA tests, 2 police investigations, and a private detective couldn't do alone. And Lisa's decade of fighting afterward put her name on a bill in Parliament. She never forgave herself for the 5 years before that. Years after the trial, Lisa said something about her daughters, about the fight over the prison visits, the fines, the appeals she kept losing. "At least I can say to my girls when they're older, I tried. They will know that Mummy at least tried to keep us away from him." But the line from this whole story that stays, the one that explains why some cases end and some don't, is something Lisa said to Candy. Candy, who got her verdict, her apology from the world, her glorious day on the courthouse steps. Lisa told her, "It's over for you, but it will never be over for us."